Patani quilts are the kind of bedding that people use in southeast Pakistan and western India. They are used every day by about 2 million people. They use them on their beds, and their beds are rectangular wooden frames with rope or webbing or something like that strung on them. So they're a little bit uncomfortable, so they put a quilt on top of the bed frame, and then they pull on as many as they need on top of them for warmth at night. And people sleep outside, so not like if you're in a house where you can control your temperature. You control your temperature by the number of quilts you have on. The patterns on many of the quilts were found etched in pottery from 2,000 years ago. So it looks like these quilt designs maybe started at the same time as the pottery designs. Typically, they're made in the villages by women who live with very few amenities. The lives of the women that make these quilts, they're really an integral part of their lives. Their mothers, they're usually taught by mothers, or if the mother isn't there for some reason, grandmothers, on how to quilt. They start about age 12. The girls sit next to the women. They learn what it's like, their roles as women, and they start preparing for their wedding, and being married is really a big part of the society. And the other thing is they create things of value. In these villages where there's not much money, a lot of times a family's wealth is counted by how many quilts they have. So it is the work of the women that create the wealth of the family in one of the important ways that it's counted, and that's the number of quilts. So it is something that the family holds dear and they pass down. The grandmother made it, gave it to a child, gave it to a grandchild. And it's been cared for all these years because grandmother made it, and it keeps grandmother in the memory. Technology is one of the challenges in preserving these quilts. So number one is the production of the fabric. The cotton has become more expensive than synthetics like nylon and polyester. So those nylon and polyester have really nice bright colors, but it just has changed the whole feel of the quilts. The second way that technology has come into the picture is sewing machines. So in the past, all the quilts were done with hand sewing. For these design features, they use sewing machines, which have a completely different look than the hand stitches. The third way technology has changed things is the ubiquitous cell phone. So in the past, girls would learn to sew when they were teenagers. And in the recent years, when girls have started to go to school, which is a good thing, their free time is after school. And at first, they were using that time to learn how to sew, do embroidery, prepare a dowry for when they got married. But now a lot of them aren't interested because they'd like to spend that time with their cell phone. Something like technology may be taking away some of the special things out of cultures as people become more homogeneous. There are some designers I know in Pakistan and India that are taking some of the patterns out of the quilts and adding them to clothing, which I think is a fantastic way to keep those the patterns, the color, the images alive, and to be sort of an identifier of something really special from this community. One reason why keeping up this quilting tradition is really important is because their creative expressions, for the most part, are with a needle and thread. So their clothing has traditionally been highly embroidered with all kinds of creativity and mirrors and colored thread and designs. So it's their clothing and the bedding are the two areas where women can be very creative. There's a few things that can be done as change is taking over so many of these communities. One, I think, is make an effort to appreciate what the culture was. And so I think in the case of these quilts, one of the things that was my major objective when I first started studying these quilts was to research them and document them. They had never been documented before, and in any extensive kind of way, and so I started a collection to make sure that had examples of the different kinds of quilts, and then documenting what these patterns are and whatever I can find out about how they're made. So I think a lot of traditions in this world have come and gone because nobody has taken the time to sort of to make record of them in some way. Supporting, if there are artisans that take this on as a way to express themselves and decide to sell, to support them in the market. I think that's a healthy way in this situation where a common thing is becoming far less common. To support anyone who is trying to keep it alive, I think that's really important. And I think in our own lives, I think one of the things we might think about is there anything that we are sacrificing that's part of our heritage or our identity to what are we sacrificing to become more homogeneous? So I think there's really some very beautiful things that come from these quilts. The women will say things like, because they sleep outside, they'll say things like, I think about the quilt that I'm making and how it will look under the stars, which I think is so lovely because they are putting their quilt in the context of where it's going to be used outside to see how, and they think about how it will look with starlight on it.